Hello and welcome to This and That. I'm Dave Lees.
And I'm Jonathan Byer. Hi, Dave. Sweater coordinating going on. I've got a stripe.
Blues
solid.
are coordinating. This one just came, so one of my gifts to myself. I deserve it. This is the
You're worth it.
We're going to be discussing everything going on in the skating world this week as we ramp up towards the end of the season. So if you are new here, please smash that like button, ring that bell for notifications, and comment below. Send us the love. We need it. Okay, like these skaters who are starved of the audience. Okay. Lots of things simmering happening this week. We have some announcements with, some safe sport things, some new partnerships. The Canadians had their monitoring sessions, so there are lots of whispers about what's going on there. So we're also gonna have Korea Nationals this week. So next week is going to be so exciting. So what we do know about next week, it's going to be the Russian Cup final, and this is really about two people, and there's a third name being bandied about that I don't think is realistic. It's going to be about a showdown between Elizaveta Tuktamisheva and Alyona Kosternaya for the third spot on the Russian team. Anna Sherbakova qualified for the world team by winning the Russian national championships. Trusova withdrew, so it's more or less assumed that she's being selected for world.
It was interesting because there was that Plushenko article where he said that they agreed to send her, so she will not be competing.
Yeah,
is what he said in that interview. Yeah.
So, and that makes sense. She's had a strong season overall, especially versus the other. And a lot of fans are really concerned that they're not competing. And I think Sherbakova looked quite ill still when she was at the Team Cup. There were reports of different health issues going on. Some skaters, I think, so Nikova kind of alluded to it, like vaguely. I know the fans are going to be like, she's fine. You don't know, you're not a doctor. It's been suggested by many that she was not in her prime health. So I see no reason for her to compete. We have seen that program 10,000 times.
Yeah.
Get healthy, peak for the World Championships. I think this is kind of the point in the season where they've all been rushing and getting back from COVID, and I think train and get healthy. And I mean, who knows how much time off they are allowed at this point in the season, but I think for her and for Trusova, I mean, come on, she's not going to be beaten by two other girls, even if she doesn't go. If you think realistically,
right.
I mean, come on, are they not gonna send her? That would be insanity. So yes,
of course, yeah.
So she is going, and she gave an article today. It came out. I was reading her. They asked her about her leg. I think they referred to her ankle injury for earlier in the season, and she was saying that, well, I don't talk about health problems, but it's getting better every day, and I'm learning to deal with it. So that sounds like normal, like sprain, post-sprain situations, because I think the big thing
she could do her off-ice schmacting with Morozov in the meantime. You know, there's much to be done.
Do you think that they worked on the knee thing like he did, where we were like,
I think he's going to teach her to sell here, and I think I think it can bamboozle many if she can just schmacked her way out of it up here.
Listen, he's a talented person. He is any person to schmacked their way.
As much an acting coach as a choreographer in many ways, which I think is important.
When my friend Jane was telling me that when Javi was first in the rink, they didn't really consider him to have good skating skills, but it just wasn't something that was focused on. So they automatically gave him, the sailor who was falling over. But then as soon as he got to the cricket club, I think he has just naturally.
He developed beautiful edges. Yeah.
He didn't have bad edges with Nikolai, but it wasn't something that was his strength. And I think they were so focused on getting him the quads and the jumps at that point in time. And they knew that the components marks at that point would kind of follow. A lot of the men weren't really doing that. Yeah, when they really worked, when Tracy Wilson put her mind to getting him that Olympic medal, and apparently she was on a mission. So yeah,
I enjoyed watching one of the vintage videos you posted. I think it was the 87 Worlds or something like that, where they had the fluff piece about Tracy and Rob beforehand. And basically Rob was like, I'm artsy. And Tracy's like a taskmaster and very intimidating about art. our schedule. It was fun to listen to know she was going to become such a coach.
People have done everything in Opak while we should have known, right? She's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
perfect for the media and perfect for coaching, right? She's like writing it all down. I actually remember her at a press conference taking notes, one of the only people there who didn't ask many questions, but was writing it down, everything that these people were saying. So very diligent, that Tracy Wilson. So
that's why we love her. Yeah, exactly.
She is a real gem. There are supposed to be some skaters moving to work with them for the next year. So I think we're going to have to watch kind of situations developing. So there's a lot of like simmering, I think it's at that point of the season where I don't think anyone, you never know officially until after the World Championships, but there are certainly rumors. So I think that's interesting. I will be watching, I think, no one from Russia, anyone, so don't worry. It's nothing like that. So
because, for instance, as we talk about Korean nationals coming up, Junhwa Cha has not been able to be in Toronto, correct? He's been in Korea this whole time, yes?
So I know that the Korean Federation decided not to send them. I forget whose decision it was, and to keep skaters, all these governments have so many different things. Actually, one of the things we're going to talk about with when we get to the Canadian selection is that, there's debate about what to do with the athletes who compete at the Worlds, if there's going to be a World Team Trophy, because of course, Canada has a very strict 2-week quarantine. And it's not like the US where it's like suggested, and then you see people like out to dinner the night after they came back and they're like, I was fine, I had a test. And you're like, that just means nothing. It was a point in time. So, they check on you for 2 weeks. The government is calling you. It's
I know people that went to Canada to visit their family from here, and they had to do the whole quarantine thing, and people stopped by for like an impromptu visit to make sure that they had indeed not left that space.
It's like a very hefty fine, like north of 500,000, I think, Canadian, or at least in I'm sure people will write down the specifics, and jail time as well. So quite serious about, and you know what? They haven't had the same spread that we have had. So, but it's been very hard for the skaters to train because they close the rinks there and all of that. So there's lots going on in Canada. And it's just, I think that's been one of the most interesting things over the last year is Canadian friends being like, what is going on in America? It's like, well, who really does?
And different even, to know that like something like Paris, like they're not supposed to be leaving at night, or like they're under curfews, and other countries, as we've seen, again, if you just watched skating coverage, for example, you'd think nothing had changed. So
the Paris is interesting. The curfew thing is interesting because Corona only spreads at night, but then you think maybe statistically more people are out at night versus in the day when they're at work. So who really knows the rationale? But then obviously it hurts business. It's not a it's a tough situation. Okay.
Correct.
Tense. Ooh, I get like I do know that different federations, the Koreans have they were supposed to have events earlier throughout the year that were canceled and postponed, and we believe that these athletes have been training, but we really haven't seen many clips of them on Instagram, and we haven't seen a lot of activity. I do know that June, I believe, has done some FaceTime, or at least send videos to coaches and sending back based on schedules and all of that. So Hanyu does that as well, where they're sending video with critiques and those sorts of things. So it will be very interesting to see how these skaters look. Ensu had a growth spurt last year. Maybe this year, is she more adjusted to her height? Yelim Kim is always kind of steady. Hyen Lee, was growing in the last couple of years. And so far, so good. I think last year with her, the growth spurt was working. So you never know how it's all, the coordination is going to be affected by.
And I'm intrigued because we were talking about this young you with Mia Hamada now has been in Japan. So is this the kind of thing where she will appear at Korean nationals, or do we think she will not?
I believe she will appear. I didn't hear that.
I think it would be important for her to do so because there really are, even though Ensu was only 7th at her nationals last year, obviously she's still a front runner for the world team, but you really do have 4 female skaters here who can really vie for those spots.
Or that we know of. I mean, there have been
Yeah.
Korean skaters who have been going in Colorado over the last couple of years, learning triple axels and those sorts of things. They have a lot of talent and parents who are very organized about getting them the kind of training that they need to succeed. They seem more driven and more organized than some of these American skaters in many ways. I think the big question mark is what is going on with Ensu? Young Yu, if she is steady and better than she did at NHK, I think she would have to be considered the prohibitive favorite. I would really be looking at someone like a Hyen Lee to look at how could she do? Could she be someone who wins? Because she was on the rise last year, but had growth to do and power and more technical content for sure. But Young Yu has done triple axels and quads, but maybe not rotated them always. So I think it's who knows what can be, in a year. But I think also then you see, okay, so these skaters have been out of competition. Have they maintained the same level of discipline and motivation and training when you don't have?
Well, it's interesting, despite Young Yu's sort of lackluster situation at NHK, she has seemingly been in a more competitive training environment this whole time where people have been competing. So one wonders if that's an advantage also maybe by the time she does go to compete again.
I mean, she's skating with Miyamada. I'm sure it's intense. I'm sure all of these coaches,
Exactly.
I'm sure all of these skaters have a pretty intense environment, but I'm curious to see what they look like. We heard their music announcements and I had to laugh because each one had a bunch of war horses. But my understanding is that some, like Ensu had her programs choreographed maybe before they left, for lockdown last year, but then others didn't. So, around March, April is when some skaters start getting programs for the next year. Some skaters get programs before they have their break. Some skaters like to have their break and then get programs, but then also you have to get your legs back under you before you get your programs because you don't have your feel for your edges, and that takes a little time. So, but some skaters like to do
I feel like I would have been the skater that like halfway through the fall Grand Prix, I would already be thinking about what music I wanted for next season. Or every time that my current program didn't go well, I think I'd already be fantasizing about what to skate to next time.
If you're someone who is into music and into ideas, you have to have that like pencil list, because otherwise I find myself in terms of picking music, I have to have a running log of things that I like and almost like write it in an iPhone note, because otherwise you get to
throw it in a playlist. I used to do that for just musical repertoire that I would be performing. There's always a thing called potential. And then I would just throw a whole bunch of things in potential playlists.
Then you don't want to over listen to it during that amount of times because you don't want to get sick of it. You're gonna have to spend a lot of time with this music. So you don't want to pick it too early and then be like listening to it all the time. And then by the time you go to beat it, you're like, it's so dumb. Who's gonna love it? Anyway.
Or tired of it before you've even begun. Yeah, of course. So, but having said that, I think most of these selections that we were reading, Hyen Lee, Ave Maria, and Black Swan.
Ave Maria, I think it's gonna be lovely for her. Black Swan, interesting. I mean, that is a different side of her that we haven't seen. Remember, she kind of had.
She has a very lyrical quality to her skating. That's like throwback
dance type program that she did before. So I'm curious. She has a personality to her skating that I like. Ensu, keeping her Capriccio Español short, I believe that was the same one that she did. It was a Spanish themed short program that she did a year ago.
I'd be ready for new memories.
East of Eden for the free. Skating like the angel Michelle Kwan, Ensu. I love her. You know what? Here's what I'll say is that everyone was kind of laughing because Ensu's name just gets bandied around, I think, from the infamous Worlds and all of that stuff. But the best program she ever did was a Jeff Buttle program to Somewhere in Time. So yes, Jeff Buttle doing East of Eden is very much in the same genre. I think it could work beautifully for her. It could be.
I think so, 100%.
It could be a home run. right?
The
And
right kind of derivative. Yeah.
so for that, it makes sense. Yelim Kim doing Liebesdrama and Love Story, that has a who cares feeling. I don't know.
It does have a tired feeling to it, maybe.
But her skating always does. And it's nothing, I don't know if it comes from the music or her approach, but she doesn't skate with a lot of passion, right? She skates in a very business-like manner from time to time, and nothing is bad about her skating.
No, but nothing stands out as super memorable either.
Yeah, it's this interesting thing where she kind of does well. It's like Satskova. It's like Satskova. You know, she does well. Nothing is bad. Nothing is great. It's kind of like Paulina, where they don't ever learn how to like do the big element and create excitement and learn the highs and lows of music and performance and drama and all of that. And
kind of that like quality filler third slot. You know, she'll do her job.
Good cuter.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
But I mean, like on a team, like if you send her on a Grand Prix, you know she'll do fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's not going to embarrass the nation. No apologies.
Exactly.
Necessary. But, and I don't know if I talked about this last week, but if I don't think I did, because I think you would have loved it too much. You know, I was talking about people not being able to get in the border, right?
Right.
So after Japanese nationals, Satoko wasn't able to get into Canada. I believe she was stopped in Japan.
Okay.
Wasn't able to go back and train with Lee Barkel. He was able to. This is all gets into like planning that they're having to do with like Jason Brown and other people when they come back from Worlds. We get that World Team Trophy that we'll talk about. So Satoko. Now, one of the interesting things is that Yuka Sato was in Toronto working as a coach on Battle of the Blades with Queen Sandra, because Sandra has impeccable taste. Why wouldn't you have Yuka there, right? Everyone loves
Ave, yeah.
So, and you know, Yuka is very maternal to certain Japanese skaters. Someone like Mao, who is taking from her parents, but Satoko has always been someone that Yuka has been very high on. And I think, you know, they both, you know, Satoko knows English and, you know, they really, I think they have like a bond. And she was helping her during one of the ISU or one of the videos last year, I think when people were raising money during the pandemic or something like that. She was helping Satoko translate or something like that, you know, so there's been a connection there. So Satoko is currently in Detroit Skating Club with Yuka, who has been out of the coaching mix and was just helping out. But if there's anyone to pull Yuka back in, it's someone like Satoko. And I have to say,
I know, yeah.
I don't think there's anything that Lee could do for her that Yuka couldn't. In the meantime, maybe this is—
I agree.
Yeah. Look, all Satoko is going to do at this point, skate a little bit faster, get a little bit more height in the jumps.
Right.
Yuka and Jason seem to be someone that they kind of helped improve Alyssa Cisney's technique before she got injured. It was getting better, breaking those bad habits. And I think that they could help Satoko. I think it'll be too—
Yeah, okay, interesting, because you would know more about Alyssa's journey with them. Like, by the time Jeremy arrived there, I feel like his jump technique, whether he was able to rely on it mentally or not, is a different story. But I think it had been solidified by the time he got to Yuka and Jason.
He didn't have any big—
like a Valentina or something.
He didn't have any big problems, so they just kept it consistent. You know, and
but Alyssa joined at an earlier part where you felt like Yuka and Jason sort of helped with her jump technique a bit.
Earlier, it was more like they had things that they needed to correct because her technique was a little bit crazy with, especially, remember she had those hinge boots, and then she always had like a scary double axel that was kind of tilted and around the corner, and I think some of her jumps, they really helped her technique, like figure it out. And again, not like huge, but they fix, you know. And I think with Satoko, she does things where she'll jump and not sometimes go through the toe pick and not go through the toe on, especially like her toe loops and stuff like that. Or she kind of, like they talk about when you take out the ice, you want to go through the toe pick, right? And Satoko is kind of an anxious jumper, and she'll go like that. right? Like
in that she's almost going too quickly to
Yeah.
take advantage of the full foot motion. Okay.
Yes, you want to go up and rise through the toe on a takeoff to get that extra height and that extra. And she is like anxious and like sometimes it doesn't even look like she picks in, right? And she's like very, especially on anything, you could tell that the toe jumps are very anxious for her. And at the same time, those are the ones that she often under rotates. So,
right,
very
because of the rush timing, you're saying.
Well, I don't know if it's only because of that she under rotates, but it's a contributing factor. If you get more height, you're more likely to rotate while you're there. I don't think it's the only reason she. But Satiko's
that could be very interesting.
I don't know if it's the Adayas on Satiko, but do you ever notice that it looks like she's got like these giant feet and a tiny girl? Like it's just
like that are literally weighing her down.
Yeah. See, Courtney McCool had these huge. I remember they said that she was one of the shortest gymnasts on the team, but she had one of the biggest shoe sizes. But she also had the best toe point, so it helped her look much longer. Because if she didn't, it would be so jarring when you see someone who doesn't extend. So it's just yes. But Satiko, I don't know if it's the Adayas or what it is, but the skates are always so noticeable on her. So
yes, I agree.
like zoomed in and being like, is she gonna rotate? So
yeah.
So yeah, that's I'm curious. I think Yuka could be lovely. Get her to open up and just I think she should stay. Get Yuka back in the mix. Because if you got one student, you could take on a second, right? You're already teaching every day.
Don't you think? Yeah, exactly. You're already there. Yeah.
Come on, those shows that she was going to produce at Sailor Moon, it's not going to happen probably before the Olympics anyway. So put her in, remember?
And I think we saw like if Lee was going to be able to do something phenomenal for Satoko, it might have happened by now. Because she did, it's not like she was with him a month or two, like she really committed. Yeah. And I didn't know that. Yeah.
So I'll be very curious to see what improvements if we see. Will we get to see Yuka at World? I mean, if she's been working with her. I mean, wouldn't you love to see Yuka in the Kiss and Cry?
I miss her in the Kiss and Cry.
I like her energy. She's very smart.
Very.
Yeah,
and always had a joy to her skating that I think is important for your coach to encourage.
Also like a realistic exactness when she speaks. Having interviewed her, she's very smart and very direct. She's not gonna have like the Trusova highs and lows, the Yeteri Plushenko, like she's just. I remember they explained it that. Okay, there was this whole season when Jeremy Abbott, in my opinion, was really underscored at nationals based on the way that they judge components in 2011. And
yes,
you could point at the judging, and it was when he did the Holocaust program, Life is Beautiful. Remember the one?
Life is Beautiful, yeah.
He had such like a beautiful program. He did so well at NHK that year, and then at Nationals, he had some mistakes. It was such a gorgeous program. Unlike Gracie, who had clearly not seen the film, and she was like, that was like, one of the biggest cringes of all time. Yeah, so Jeremy did the whole, remember, had the balloon kind of thing going on. And I remember that Yuka was like, well, the mistakes you made were like on a triple Salchow. And this is the kind of jump that we don't even focus on because it's so easy for you, but you would come late to sessions. Right. So think about if you're 5 minutes late every day, think about how much time that is over a year. And
that you've lost on that jump, yeah.
You've lost that you could have worked on that jump. And then you know what? The next year he won nationals. So, and that's not someone being like, you idiot, like that's just like someone being like, well, this is how we're going to think about it. And you're like, okay. And the next year he had one of his best performances ever at the national championships. So I think that kind of approach works for a lot of skaters. I think Satiko is kind of that more even personality. So that's
a rarity in her field.
Rarity. Oh, did we? I don't know if the weeks blend together. So I was thinking about Mariah Bell. Adam Rappan got engaged. So congratulations.
Right. We did mention that. We did mention that last time. But we saw the beginning of Mariah Bell posting combinations, but this week we definitely saw them over and over again.
She is on a mission. But remember that she's someone who has responded time and time again to when she has had some adversity.
Yes.
Thinking about 2018 being a really rough season, I think she had some injury stuff. And remember she had that, was it West Side Story? It was just like a very uninspired year for her. She came back the next year better and better, from that time. Remember when in 2016 she did all those combinations, she went from Poirier to Raphael, maybe there was some tension there, and she came out like she was going to prove to everyone that she was a top lady. So I am thinking that this could be the kind of fire that Mariah Bell responds well to when she needs to prove herself, because I don't think that she's one of those people that's like, uber, I'm going to win. But when you challenge her or don't send her to the World Championships, I think she's going to come back fighting. And I think that's certainly the kind of right mindset she needs going into an Olympic year. So I think not making Worlds could be the best thing that ever happened to her. I mean, obviously she would have loved to have won the Nationals, but if that's not going to happen,
of course, yeah.
This could motivate her more in the long run. I don't know, I'm curious to see what.
And I do think it helps. Like you said, I think that burden of being a favorite to win Nationals was carried all year.
Yeah.
I think just having that lifted also, combined with her desire to fight back, may put her in really good stead.
She's never really been, going as far back as I remember watching her, maybe it was different when she was younger, but I remember her coming up around the same time as Gracie Gold and, being very much in Gracie's shadow, I think at the junior level, kind of a ways back. And, when you're the favorite, it's very different. And she might not have been one of those people that's used to being
used to the spotlight that way. Yeah.
It's very different when you're one of the top people versus the top person that everyone was talking about.
Right.
She was on the cover of the magazine that everyone was focused on. Is Mariah Bell going to win? Is she going to do it? And I remember the first time that I saw Michelle skate after Salome, the first time I saw her do the Taj Mahal was at this like CBS competition called like the Continents Cup or wherever. It was a beautiful program. She skated atrociously. I mean, there were falls and pops. And I remember the first time that being like, whoa, maybe she's not this invincible skater that everyone has been acting like she is. And Mariah at Skate America had that same kind of vibe where you're just like tight, just like not being as aggressive and like protecting something, afraid to make.
Yeah, exactly.
After.
Yeah.
It was just like a thing, just like watching it. It was not surprised it happened. Now that she's clearly fired up and ready to, she's not someone that posts a lot of training clips very often.
Right. That's not her MO until it was. Yeah.
Good for her. I think she has something to prove. And I think, look, Adam will probably be back in the US, and that is certainly beneficial to her. And I think, look, anytime you're going to be working that hard, a coach is going to be super inspired to work with you too. So
of course. Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I want to ask you about an Instagram post on the skating lesson page in which we saw some senior men standing together, pairs in California, and stage left was one Danny O'Shea. What's the scoop?
I don't know the scoop. I know that he had been there for a tryout before.
Okay.
And I know that he certainly had tryouts, and he's not going to be in Colorado. And he was with Jim and Split. So it does make sense for him to be training with Jenny and Todd. I think he would also be perhaps looking at, I think that they're certainly building in Chicago. And I think Rockney has a lot of strong, Rockney and Stephanie, I think have a lot of strong, partnering skills. And I think that is certainly something. And then I don't know what, the situation with John and Sylvia, in the wake of Morgan Zippers, I don't know what that is, but it seems very logical to me that he is with Jenny and Todd, I think at this point, looking for a team. And that looks to be like a very good environment for training. I think certainly competitive, and something that we talked about years ago. You know, I forget who did we want Alex and Chris to train Tara and Danny, or whoever it was. We were like, you know, them training together. Now they really actually, so many of them do train together, and they've had a phenomenal season. And you know what, pair skaters.
Yes, here we go.
Have oftentimes more of a mutual respect that they give one another, even as they are competing. There is such an art and appreciation for pairs that even as they are very competitive with each other, they also respect each other maybe more than single skaters do, because it's
for the craft itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I do notice that. So I think that could be an interesting little hub, you know, for that sort of thing, and they build on each other's lifts and their elements and things like that. So I mean, they can also partner swap and love, but you know, it seems that these are older teams, and I think he would have a few options. I'm curious to see who he's, you know, trying with, but I think the fact that he is there, you never know when these posts go out on Instagram, is that post to show, okay, so they obviously, when they take it was with Chris and the guys, and they're probably like, oh, the guys are all together, let's take a photo. But you do know when you post that either
you are very well aware that it's going to send a ripple, you know, a ripple effect through the community, wondering what's.
So that is either you post this and Danny is looking for a partner and people are like, oh, let me contact Hot and Jenny. Or you're saying, look who is here. Oh, we have everyone here. It's one or the other, but it certainly fills a purpose of people being like, hello, what's happened?
It was not candid necessarily.
What's going on here, honey?
What is this? What's this all about?
So what's happening?
Intriguing.
He could learn the art of the twist from Chris Knierim. So I mean, Chris has quite the little coaching business going on there, because he helped put Megan Westenberg with, she has a partner, Blake Eisenbach, and you know, they have a crew in that West Park. So
yeah, I think something exciting is happening there, as opposed to other pair announcements that are less exciting to me.
I do think though that Jenny and Todd seem like look, they come from John Nix. He's very direct.
Again, more even keel, like we were just talking about Yuka, and that it's that unemotional sort of like 2 + 2 = 4. Like
some sort of drama or competitiveness in skating, but you don't hear about Jenny and Todd like the horror story
of it. Yeah,
you know, that they don't have that like stench around them. But I have to say, I had such a visceral reaction about a couple of things that have happened in the past few weeks, and we didn't talk about it. So Mark Sadowsky was someone who I just know him as like a very enthusiastic person who loves skating. And the way that I can tell that is because, you know, when he was like a junior and a novice on Instagram, I remember that there was this challenge that was started, and I don't know if it started as a challenge or they were all copying each other, but someone was like jumping over the boards and doing like a triple.
Yes. Yes.
And I remember Mark filmed like several of these videos. And you just figure that's someone who loves skating, loves the social media, just like is enthusiastic. And I remember, he left gym with his partner and then they went to Delilah, and you're like, for several reasons that we don't need to
speculate.
I was like, and then allegedly top teams are told to leave Delilah, encouraged to by the USFS, such as Tara and Danny. And there's like allegedly, TJ's name being thrown around, right? At different situations. And being very careful. You don't want to say.
Of course.
Yeah. I know people get upset when people don't know, but it's all just, look, we don't have the article to point to. So you look at that, Mark has always been one of those people that was like supporting TJ. They're like posting as bros, and you're going like this.
I know.
Going like this because Deanna's like, he's such a nice kid. Like, what is happening? Like, what is he doing? You know, and he was like a big part of the Sappin squad and like gung ho. And you're like, oh my God, they are using this boy. They are using this boy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What is Delilah's MO? Split up the pair, or she has someone in mind that she is gonna like take your partner for. Now, TJ, when we interviewed him a couple months ago, he was definitely intimating that he had some like big tryouts coming up, and I don't think something ever came of that. But at around that point, like he was like commenting with Vanessa James on her Instagram, and we're like, did they comment about that? Like, and remember, like she commented on his Instagram, and then I said something, and she deleted her comment. Like, you're like, oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what's happening here. So, I mean, Vanessa's been rumored to be skating with everyone, from Danny to you know, constantly. This is one of those things. But you go to, you know, this whole situation with TJ, and he takes Mark's partner. And you know, the second Mark split, I think about 5 or 6 people message you, go, well, you know, she's going to wind up with TJ. And then you have to think about like her parents. So you're already with a coach who people are kind of discussing, and then you're with one of the skaters that everyone always kind of points to as being
the epitome of that discussion. Yeah.
Also, because people are gonna be like, why are you picking on TJ? In the last week or two, he just released a music video where there was a woman with a knife in it, right? Like the kinds of images and like views on women that are going like, what is happening? Okay.
Yeah, it's always been sort of a strange world swirling around him. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Join a nunnery. I don't know. Like, what are you doing? Like, women with not, like, you're giving off like a very specific kind of imagery.
Yeah.
For your music career with tens of views. I'll link to this in the description box. TJ will get more views than he's ever had. He'll be so thankful. Okay. I mean, Tommy Joe, what is this? And if you're Delilah, what are you signing off on? And what
are you doing here? Yeah. What exactly is happening? On the heels also of this Peter Opegard article, which is just like this. So in some ways we have like, we're trying to create a new vision of US pairs with Jenny and Todd and what's happening in California. And yet we have this explosion of what was.
So I have to tell you, the Peter Opegard situation has been discussed
in a decade. I always knew that he was dangerous, right?
Yeah, but I also think, listen, there are fans, and they're always gays, and they always message. They just love the Kwan sisters. They are the first family of US figure skating. They're like our version of the Kennedys. And we just want to protect them and want them to be happy with a white picket fence and successful and the whole brand of like hardiness, right? And unfortunately, and this is in no way their fault, but I've always felt that this situation was never talked about publicly because of that relation to the Kwan family, because who is going to want to damage that image?
It was a wholesome image as well. It was like the ultimate in like hard work and class and, you know what I mean? And integrity and all this sort of stuff.
And he was working at their rink, so like maybe Danny could monitor the situation, but there have just been a lot of noise surrounding this. I first heard about the biting I first heard about biting before Jessica Fund. Okay, I've just heard about that from...
It's such an odd... Sometimes when you hear these horrific things that happen, you're like, I can totally, unfortunately, see that happening. When you're talking about biting your students,
this kind of temper and
a little less expected.
But so Jenny and I have done some research, and we're talking to... It's very interesting that many of these pairs all come from similar people who have coached them. The Opegard, Delilah, Richard Callahan. They were all coached by someone like David and Rita Lowry were the coaches of them. It's very interesting how there's like a common lineage, but then you can't blame everything on like that. Then there's like, people said the DSC used to be a place where, there was like roughhousing going on between the coach and the skater and all sorts of stuff. And there used to be lots of stories about like Peter and Jill not getting along when they were training together. And there's just always been this vibe around US pairs in general, and especially, certain people where it's just, and then I remember talking to Ann Jensen once, and she's like, well, we've all talked about how, Peter always has the guy kill the girl at the end of every pair program. And remember,
oh my gosh.
Remember John Zimmerman and Stephanie Stiegler and their very famous program where when they were coached by Peter, sure enough, he kills her at the end of it. I mean, I'm just saying, like,
oh gosh.
Remember Natalie Blandis? Like, I'm surprised that, like, this is where it gets weird, where like she posted a public thing, post, right? And then and she wrote that because something that happened with her coach at 96 nationals at the junior level. She didn't mention her coach by name, but anyone would know that she
But
was.
you could look it up. Yeah.
And it's like that kind of a situation. So it's like, is that public? Is that quasi-public? Is that okay? So there's just been like a lot of inferences around this kind of area for a long time. And I think that no one wants to upset or damn it, in any way.
And I'm sorry, I mean, this is like a little bit out of left field. I remember when Jill and Peter were competing in Calgary, wasn't there like a hubbub in the audience? Like one of their brothers was screaming something at them before they went to compete. And then a camera dropped on the ice while they were skating. Like
it dropped on the ice mid-program and an usher had to go and get it. Yeah.
But there was something about, but one of their brothers was like screaming something. But this is now I'm backtracking because I don't know, but it is worth, if anyone knows the full story there was something very dramatic that was happening internally with them while they were in Calgary, I thought.
I just know that it's like one of those divorces that's been going on for a while. Like it's just, it's been an ongoing.
You mean with Karen and Peter?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
It's just
it's dark.
But I have to tell you, when do you think US figure skating first knew that there was a situation there?
I mean, it's more of the same, unfortunately. And it was interesting because we watched
them too, because like unless they launch an investigation, they live in this like quasi-legal area where they know, but they don't know. But then you're not protecting, like I think that is.
And Simone Biles on 60 Minutes this week, she was talking about the same thing. Her resentment towards USA Gymnastics was that they knew and then let people get hurt knowingly.
I think there are degrees of knowing, but there's also, I notice in rinks, is that there's and some people even messaged me about Peter and what they knew, and then being like, oh, well, we did know that, but we didn't know that. People have ideas about you. You're very much trained to keep your nose clean, keep your head down, and ignore what's going on around you. And there's a culture of that. But unfortunately, it also, and it keeps you out of the drama, but it also like allows this stuff to perpetuate because
continue
actually. But there's a culture of that, and not just from skaters, but like coaches who like know, but they're like, don't tell me that, but they do know, but maybe over drinks they heard about this. And it's just something that happens in almost every rink. And I don't know the way to fix it, right? Like, I don't know if there's, unfortunately there are, people are always worried about their careers and they don't want to report things because they're worried that it could harm your career, that you could be seen as a problem or a troublemaker. And unfortunately, I can't say that notion is wrong in US figure. They certainly have not had a tell us what's going on. We will try to fix and clean this up.
Right. It is not honesty is the best policy kind of protocol with him. Yeah.
At least that's not the impression that is given off from a lay person. That is not the impression that I think. And I think that that's something that leadership is going to have to really address and change. And I think that they can be proactive. But then you don't want to also invite yourself to have like a swarm of everything. And then how do you handle that? I think these governing bodies need a way to be able to clean house, but also be support, but then also not be thrown into bankruptcy because everyone comes like it's a hard thing. I think if there is a good faith effort to clean up and protect, there should be a way for people to clean house, but that I just think that there's it goes back so many generations in all of these sports of like behavior that's been allowed to go on that hasn't.
It's so entrenched, like you say, at every level with these lineages of what was acceptable and how far back it goes and how much it is ingrained and perpetuated. There's no safe place from it, sadly, it seems, and that's the problem. You'd have to rip up the rug underneath everyone.
Yeah,
but it should be done.
Yeah, it just very. I mean, that kind of. No one should have to worry about being bitten by their coach at the rink because maybe they're in their limits.
Or to have someone so volatile that it's even a possibility. I mean, that's
they were talking
insane.
About beverages and just like all different kind of stuff. Yeah, just
embarrassing. It's embarrassing behavior.
Well, it is. And then I think that people want to protect skating because they love skating, and people do it. And it doesn't happen, to everyone, but it is.
You can protect skating by protecting the skaters. And that's where the disconnect comes. Like, stop protecting this nonsensical, non-existent image of it you have and just clean it up.
Vox article this week. So there was a Vox article. So many people sent it to me, and I really wasn't sure if people wanted me to go yes or like. The thing is that I thought it was a more well-developed article about that there's a problem in skating and that it's not as inclusive and that it's not as popular and that there has to be ways. It was one of the more thoughtful, was a Vox article. I also felt like I had read this article like 30 times over the last years. I'm like, is that what it takes to get pitched to a thing? But like also good for you. And I thought the person wrote it very well. It was, it did connect lack of representation and like Black Lives Matter with the more endemic issues of skating, and it did connect the dots there a little bit more, how just there are financial and different ways that make it very expensive to participate in the sport. And I think that is true. Like, I look at me skating now and like what I spend, and I'm like, I don't know if my parents had that money to spend on that when I was one kid versus when you have two, and what are you doing for both? And it's just like so many different issues there. So anyway, it did make me think, and it was good. I mean, it was a successful, I think, article in that. It was like, yeah.
Well, and that those can take the risk into doing something so specialized and putting, in many ways, all your eggs in one basket there. Like, because, I mean, for so many others, that money has to be diverted to education. It has to be saved for college. It has to be, to a well-rounded child that can make money as an adult, where you're taking such a gamble. If you're going to
think, though, that we have a very individualized way of training here, and in other countries there is more of a group lesson approach, and there are pros and cons to both, right?
And I've thought this when we were watching all this Russia. People are cheering for rinks or schools sometimes as much as the individuals. So, I mean, artistically, I don't know I do know how I feel about that. I think it's negative, but
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there are teams, and even now, like, there's always like a bit of like a Frank skater or a this skater, and there are often common connecting threads and tastes and things like that. I think that there's a degree of that, but the group method, I was thinking, some of my best learning actually does happen in my group edge class, and maybe there should be more of a mix. Maybe it shouldn't be that you have, individual only lessons or group only, but like a mix of that, I think could be effective, where you work on things as a group and then work on things one-on-one with the coach. And maybe there's like a hybrid model that could at least bring down some of the costs associated with this. And during the pandemic, it's more expensive than ever. So you know, I think about that because we were working on like outside twizzles and stuff, and Igor's teaching, I don't know, 20 people at the same time to do it. But I'm kind of watching what someone's messing up on and watching me, and then he'll comment on this and that. And I was like, all of a sudden I'm doing outside twizzles that I didn't think that I could do. But at my one-on-one lesson, where I was learning it from Kristen, who, you know, there's an interesting thing, like where some coaches can like get you to do something that you were afraid to do. And then some coaches can like take something that you know how to do and refine it. But they're not the first person that gets you to do it. And for whatever reason, Igor is really good at like teaching you to do the different move. And then Kristen will like clean it up.
Yeah.
Back to it and be like,
because they're two different art forms, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think like people are like, why do you work with so many people? It's like, well, they're really like a duo. Like, it's like he gets you to do the move for the first time and then she will like fix it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, especially like on a moves test or something like that. So they're like, move your arm down and through. And she's very like precise about thinking about that. Whereas it's an interesting little yin and
yang. And of course the difference is, I mean, you have those lessons, if you're young and training, you have them nonstop throughout the week. I remember compared to like some of the top voice teachers, like for instance, if I were to have a lesson, it's $250 an hour. I know that like, that's not what someone like Frank Carroll might have charged, but those people needed to see Frank Carroll much more often than I may need to see my voice teacher. So it's not even just the rate, but the frequency of it if you're doing it right, let alone by the time you've got to take them to a competition or something. And I remember Megan sort of getting on a soapbox because she was upset that a lot of people were always talking about how expensive skating is because she felt like it was a deterrent maybe for some people to start it. But I think there is an important awareness, especially when people can donate to things like Friends of US Figure Skating or whatever they are, or the Memorial Fund and stuff like that. It is important to realize how much money it requires.
Well, also, Canadian coaches don't make the same amount that American coaches make. And some of that is due to differences in health insurance and other things like that, because coaches here have to get their own insurance. You know, the PSA doesn't really have, it's interesting, they don't have like a group health insurance plan, and maybe that's one of the big things that they should be doing, right? But my understanding is that, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that coaches have to get their own insurance. So that is, with in terms of health insurance and stuff like that, like that's very expensive. Because I remember Megan was saying, well, we don't know how many students we're going to have, and to have a kid, that's part of the reason why they didn't move to Florida. So, you know, that's just like all of these.
They're factors, yeah, totally.
That go in there. So. Yeah, I mean, there are reasons for everything. So, but yeah, it was also that Simone Biles piece that you talked about, that vault that she could do, to put into perspective, it would be like someone doing a quad axel triple toe combination.
And okay, thank you, because that's what I need, because I have to tell you, like in the same way, if a lay person is watching a Surya documentary and is supposed to be so wowed by the backflip,
we're a move that like a handful of men even do, and then she's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I watch it, but I don't obviously have anywhere near the knowledge you do. And I just sit back and think like, whoa, it looks outrageously impressive. But to know that it is indeed as if a woman just landed a quad axel triple toe, that's a different perspective.
I'm trying to put it in perspective, like it's really hard to compare it exactly without being like hyperbolic.
Of course.
Because obviously men haven't done a quad axel triple, but I'm trying to think like it's a bigger deal than someone doing a quad lutz. Okay, it's way bigger than that. I don't know that there is a way to really put an equivalency. You know, actually, in some ways, you know, the men versus women, what they do, you know, she is revolutionizing women's gymnastics for sure, and on par with many of the men, I would say. So then it's hard to like do a direct comparison what she is doing. It's so unbelievably difficult. It's just
because I'm curious to ask you, I've seen sort of like a couple of like clickbaity kind of articles where they talk about the sport trying to hold her back by banning certain things. Okay. Do you find that sensationalist, or do you think there's merit to making sure other people don't get injured?
So there's a situation that happened, is that she did this double beam dismount for years. A round off double back has been like the standard beam dismount. It was first done, I believe, by a gymnast, Ilia Mukina, around 1978-ish. And I have to double check this, but I think that she did it off the beam for the first time. And it has remained like Gina Gojan won the beam title at the 97 World Championships with the double back off of beam. That's, you know, two salts in tuck position. someone Shannon Miller added a full to the first one. And that was like the hardest that we saw off of beam for the next 25, 30 years, right? Simone comes off and she does 2 flips, 2 twists, which is until recently was an element that we rarely saw in floor exercise. And now she's doing it off of an apparatus as a dismount. They did not give that skill the adequate reward. And they used the excuse that it was to keep the sport safer. And you know what? For her, it's not giving ample reward. So
okay.
She is hurt by this. Then you look at it, I could imagine a gymnast who did not have, we see skaters go for technical content that's way too hard. If you go for that and you land short and maybe you land on your neck or something like that, you could become seriously injured. But that is also not to say that by the same token, someone could have the same injury doing any skill that is too hard for them. It doesn't start that at a certain point, this skill becomes the one that is worth so much and everyone's going to try to do it.
Right.
You could get hurt in gymnastics and become paralyzed in skating too. Look, if I went to go try to do a quad tomorrow, I could get seriously hurt if I were, ready for it. So I think there is a weird notion of why do they pick and choose certain skills and certain people to be like, now's when we're going to protect people. Really?
Right.
What about
from that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, it's a weird argument where you're like, well, I don't know that everyone is certainly, there is the thing where people do try harder skills now because they're worth more. And these, this open-ended system has in both sports led to people wanting to throw in everything in the kitchen sink. But then they make mistakes or injuries happen and things like that. There's almost no way of stopping it. You open Pandora's box with the open-ended, people are going to add on to the more difficulty. So, but then to not reward it does seem kind of unfair for someone like her.
Okay.
Then you got to think, they said safety, but then you're like, balance beam has always been one of those events that has like a lot of finesse, right? Do they consider her not like a traditional beam worker because she doesn't have like the grace and the fluidity of, the long lean style? And are they doing it so that people aren't just racking up all of their credit in acrobatic elements that can just like trump everything in terms of a score? So I don't know. These sports all have these same arguments about artistry versus athleticism.
Exactly.
And once they look at open-ended, there's no way of, in a way, skating has a better handle on this balance between the two. Gymnastics has gone so far to one that it's not even recognizable as the same sport anymore.
Okay.
So, yeah, but those articles are not super click. They're written in a way, but it's so hard because you have one gymnast who is literally so far ahead of everyone that they're having a Winter Cup. She's not competing. My friend is like, don't you think that Simone should be competing? And I was like, she can decide when she wants to compete. If this is going to keep her interested and healthy and she doesn't want to compete now, I'll compete. I don't think she's lacking in confidence.
It would be a personal choice to have no bearing on her ability. Like it wouldn't make her better or worse to do it or not. Yeah.
She knows how good she is. She seems to believe it. And realistically, maybe staying healthy is more important when you start doing all of these hard skills. You don't need to compete so many times in a sense.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
Interesting. Yeah.
What he's doing is so insane. Just very excited. I think it's going to be what? We're all going to need the Olympics this summer and then next winter because we haven't had anything besides CNN to watch as mere sport. So I don't know. I can kind of stick with that. Would like to see some high level things. Also, I wrote down, Will Annis was a skater who won, I think, juvenile.
Yeah, we have to talk this out because, as you know, my favorite jump of all time is the quadruple loop. I think it is such a beautiful jump to see. And when I saw this one, I about fell on the floor.
And this is the second quad he's done in recent weeks. He's someone who didn't qualify for nationals. It wasn't even close this year when they did the virtual event. And his jumps look fantastic. Like one of the most natural jumpers, I think, in the
effortless. They look effortless. And it's a time right now, especially where for some of the US men, the quads look more labored, the attempts. And this was just so lovely.
And you think he's training with Chris Nojan and Jimmy Ma, and they're all in Boston together. So maybe that's also having that competition is inspiring some more of these, you know, quadruple jumps. And it's a big one. It's not like one of those itty bitty.
I know. It's so lovely. And it just had such trajectory to it and flow out of it. It was a moment.
Okay, so let's talk about Canada, because the big thing there is that they're making their world team. It looks like it's going to be Keegan. It looks like Roman and Nam did not perform enough to look. They're only going by. They're going to vote. They're going to announce it. It's supposed to be Thursday. So this week we'll certainly know. The rumor is Thursday, maybe sooner. You know, so I heard Nam did okay. Roman, it wasn't the best. Now they only verified short programs because they are so concerned with making sure they qualify for the free, so they get the spots, and then trying to get these. And it's just interesting. In Canada, I was talking to Bruno Marcotte about this. He's like, you know, that we do debate at these meetings and your voices can be heard. And I was like, how passionate does it get in Canada?
Yeah, exactly. How safe do people feel voicing those opinions? Yeah.
He was like, well, it's usually not that heated. He's like, sometimes in like junior dance, maybe it's something, but
something more objective or something. Yeah.
So it does seem like, I think Keegan versus Roman, but remember, Keegan didn't get monitored during the same time, and I don't know why they didn't do like a Zoom link or anything like that, but I think the rumor is that he sent in a video with the quadlots. So I think it is safe to say that he will be going. I would think about that.
Okay. It's a shame, but I mean, if they truly believe, if they have some insight that we're unaware of as to why they think Keegan will place higher.
Well, I rewatched his Skate America, and I think that Roman has more innate talent and gifts. So I think for Keegan, though, if he did do 2 quads, Roman did 1 and a hand down at the other event, but he did a good short. But then if that's all you have to go on is those competitions, and then they both are close, and there's a debate, and then you have a monitoring, and one does markedly better than the other, then it kind of makes your decision for you.
Yeah, so, unfortunately. Now, I am of the sentiment that if you want Roman to become more confident in competing, he needs more competition time. Like, he is in desperate need of a world championships under his belt.
I also don't understand why he has this rumor, or this, not rumor, sorry, why he has this reputation of being people talk about him like he's such a bad competitor. He medaled or did well in almost every competition except for 4 continents last year. So he had 1 bad outing. Most people have 1 bad competition this season. So, no, as a junior.
And he's on the up and up. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
He's been improving. And as a junior, he was not the most consistent. But I don't think it's fair to call him like the biggest inconsistent disaster. You know, there are plenty of other skaters who have had far more dramatic ups and downs that we have watched in America, in other countries.
Of course, yeah.
So I don't think it's beneficial. I know that Canadians are like, they want to make sure they get 2 spots, but like also relax. I wouldn't like go like, because the thing is that reputation starts to get, you know that, you know, it starts to get in your own head. It's like, Sasha, why aren't you doing a clean long? Sasha, are you going to do a clean long? Sasha, are you going to mess up? Sasha, are you going to, and then you think about it, every time she goes out there, she's thinking like, am I going to screw up? Your ultimate.
And she knows it's the discussion on national television.
When you
here's Sasha, she's probably going to mess up. I mean,
something that we all want, we're actually like doing everything we can to prevent it happening by like speaking about it so much. And it's human nature and there's no way to get around it. But it is true that you know, Vanessa Atler in the bars, Sasha and the clean program. You look at like Roman, it's like, I don't know that you want to, I would encourage him.
Yeah, instead of give him a complex that he doesn't need to have.
So
I mean,
if
the
there's
plot
all this
twisted for
debate-
me though, because you were talking about if they need top 10, and I was like, that should be easy peasy. And then I kind of sat down and I was like, well, maybe it's not so easy
Okay, look
peasy.
at the top 10. You have 3 in the US who could all be in the top 10. Vincent, Nathan, Jason.
3 in Japan.
Yeah.
Yuma.
Definitely 2. And I would say, yeah, 3 in Japan. Bo Yang Jin is in the mix. Kolyada. Aliyev.
No, it's Aliyev might, Inyatov might. I mean, it's the third Russian, if he just lands enough technical content, could squeeze in the top 10 also.
You know, they're like right on the bubble of all of these.
Someone like Kevin, he might be right in that 9th, 10th. Yeah. You know, I didn't realize suddenly the depth of people, and it will be a thing to make sure.
Also, 2 from Italy that are quite good.
Landing more quads than ever. Yeah.
And they've competed more. So yeah, the one thing that I do, people have said that virtual didn't count, but I just wanted to say one thing is that Canada did do virtually different than the US did. So one thing that Canada did is that there was a 6-minute warm-up. They made skaters go to different competitions. So even though they were in some of their home rinks, it's different than the US ones. They made them have a 6-minute warm-up, and then they had a skate order, and they filmed them. So many of them were actually at the same center and could see each other. So it was a bit more like a real competition than it was.
Emulated it a bit better, yeah.
Well, he was in a real competition, he was virtual. I don't give a lot of credence to that, because at the same point, you had an assigned date and time that you had to do it. And I think that in many ways, in terms of that virtual, Canada did the best they could, and the most organized and the most simulated real competition.
The crowd being the only question mark. And has Sweden announced, are they anticipating a crowd, or is it going to be?
I don't think so. I don't think, we have not heard a lot of details, but you think
because
about that.
That's a part of the actual real competition scenario that I think throws a lot of people is actual arena energy, which will be different without a crowd. I think it's why some of the juniors, especially at like US Nationals, might have been able to tackle that pressure in a slightly different way than having the big audience as well as the competition itself.
In some respect, having your peers there is just as stressful. You know,
exactly.
The crowd gives you an energy boost, even though it can freak you out and intimidate you. It also depends on the person and how you're feeling. So,
right.
We did hear Piper and Paul are going to go to Worlds. Maybe their coaches will not go, or a different coach will take them than Caroline. So I think that's like a situation to watch. But I think they have a great chance at a good finish for the World Championships, especially with, look, you've got Sinitz and Katsalapa. They went back to old programs, but they've been out of competition all year. Injuries. What is the health status?
They're the team that makes me nervous the most politically. I think the most political shenanigans at the Worlds may come out to help them.
And I agree, but at the same time, if someone has been injured for so long and then had COVID, are you really going to trust them at the end of the day if you're a judge? Your federation
do you care if you're a particular judge? If you're a series of judges that are there to do a job, you may ignore that trust factor.
But I do think it's the kind of year where if someone's been injured and out and doesn't look strong, and someone's just been training and does a great job, you're kind of going to be like, I think it's one of those years where you might be like, but if Olympic qualification is tied to it, and who knows, you know, Russia wants to be spots in dance, and you're like, well, this one's going to be 4th, and this one's going to be this, you know, I mean, anything could happen, but I think it's a big opportunity for certain teams like Couple and Donahue and Chuck and Bates and Gilson Port and both Russians, I think, and Guinard and Fabry. I think they can all go through knowing that this is a year that stuff can happen. You know, people, there's going to be some movement happening for.
But don't you feel whatever happens here, especially in dance now with the French, you know, sitting out, there's a big opportunity for backlash also. Lest we forget when the Shibutani snuck in for that bronze medal at the Worlds, we had a North American sweep, and it was almost like the writing was on the wall that like the world was not going to let that happen again.
What I compare it to, you know, when Ty and Randy won when Arena Rodina had a baby? You can never convince me that Ty and Randy are not world champions. They knew what the field was going in that year. They had to deal with the pressure. They skated the performance of their lives. you can't tell me that Rodnina and Zaitsev were inherently better than Lake Placid, that they were there. So then you're like, you know what? They really, all intents and purposes, yes, they are 100% world champions. And I think the same thing is going to be here. You know, every year is a new year. People have new programs, things change, partnership announcements change, your coaching. So I think next year is a completely new year. We also haven't seen Papadakis and Cizeron do a full program in a long time. They had COVID problems last year. She had burnout and maybe some anxiety and other stuff going on. It's been a minute since we have seen them really in their element. I mean, 2019, they were certainly in their element, and then they were, so you're like, you know, okay, they're not here. They're sitting this year out. I think this year, I think you could think about it that this year is about this year. You know, I mean, do we know that Sui and Han are going to come back and automatically be number one because they were number one in the past? I mean, I think in pairs, you're like, anything could happen there. Right. They could side-by-side jump, and the Russians could. I mean, Megan said that she thinks that Sui and Han can compete well in this interview that she did, that I read it. I'll link to it. It's a very interesting article that Claire Couture did. And then in the next breath, Megan goes, yeah, and I think the Russian pairs will sweep at Worlds. And she was like praising the Chinese and how well they could do. And at the same point, I was like, you know, they really could. And all of it
could, 100% they could.
All it would take would be like a mistake and a half from Sui and Han.
Peng and Jin. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think Boyang, you know, Peng and Jin have had more inconsistency, and it not going to take much. So, and I'm curious, like, how strong will Kirsten Moortowers and Michael be? Because it seems like Alexa and Brandon are kind of riding a wave, and when you have that kind of momentum, things can happen. You know, like. And they don't look like a team that's...
And all three Russian teams, like, if they all deliver, yes, I think it's very possible, but all three have shown that they are vulnerable at times with their nerves as well, and their ability to deliver consistently. We've seen high highs and low lows from each team at some point this season, so...
Well, I also want to say Mark Sadowsky was in some pictures where he was maybe having some tryouts in Chicago. Mark, you get your butt out of Colorado. Do not let anyone use you, okay? You are a talented skater.
And I love Chicago. Who doesn't want to live in Chicago? Come on.
You are a talented skater. Do not trust any of these people, okay? Anyone that...
Move to the Windy City.
Maybe you're just a Home Alone fan. You should just, you know, move to the Windy City.
Go see that tour. Yeah.
Go visit Bill Hirsch. Go bike riding together. Off ice training. With,
oh my God, amazing. Yes.
Yes. Incredible. Yeah. Just so much is happening. It's going to be a dramatic end to the season.
This week we have the Russian skate coming up, which will be huge, and Korean nationals, which I'm very excited to watch as well. So
it's like a repeat of Kosternaya. It feels like when Medvedeva was chosen over Tuktamishva. Now Medvedeva did win that surprise bronze medal, so I guess everything, you know, worked out okay for the Russian Federation. But for Tuktamishva, she left feeling some kind of way. I don't know how she couldn't feel some kind of way if Kosternaya winds up going. You know, the Russian fans don't love Kosternaya. She's more loved by the other fans around the world.
Yeah.
Jonathan, this is about to get so messy. I'm just warning you.
I know. But how did you like her interview? One, where she said she thinks Nikita will win the gold at the Olympics. She thinks Valyeva will win the gold at the Olympics. And she thinks Tarasova Morozov will win at the Olympics. And she thought Nathan Chen would win at the Olympics. But just in general, her overall perspective, she does seem, with her age, I mean, obviously in real life, she's still very young, but she does seem to have a perspective on what she can offer and what she can't. And she is talking like the only chance she has at those Olympics is a quad. She can't even pretend to go if she doesn't have it up and ready.
I did love that picture of Mishin sitting down with all of his students around him and him. And I sent Galina.
That was surprising.
So I sent Galina a picture of that, and then I just said, like, the poster to The Godfather, and she sends the picture back. She always sends me the picture back. I never understand. I don't know if she doesn't know how to use her phone, right? And she writes Mafia underneath.
Because he talked about Halloween costume. Like he was like all decked out in a white suit and the hat and all that jazz. Yeah.
Greatest picture. Okay.
No.
Warms the heart.
No.
I don't know. I am so ready. I'm so ready. It's going to be an exciting week. So hold it in. Sexy, everyone. All right.